we begin with our next panel discussion on the role of hydrogen in environmental, social, and governance strategies, ESG strategies. For the same, I would like to request Mr. Amrit Singh Dev, Senior Managing Director, FTA Consulting, to please come on stage as he will be moderating the session. As panelist, we have for the session Mr. Anand Narayana Swamy, Director Business Development Black and Wheat Private Limited, Mr. Divyendu Sarkar, Project Head Renewable Energy Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, and Mr. Sabrish Nair, Director Technical Marketing Asia, Tubasex, with Mr. Pramod Acharya, Chief Sustainability Officer, JSW. So may I please request the moderators and panelists to please come on stage.
Thanks, Pushkar. I know we're getting close to the lunch time, so let's make this a little interactive. Okay. Before we start, so firstly, thank you CII and all participants here today. I'm sure everybody has a view on hydrogen, or at least has heard of hydrogen in the context of all that's been announced at the policy level, investments, as well as in your respective companies. So let's start with a show of hands on how many companies in the room, or if you're aware, have created a hydrogen group in your respective organizations. Hands up, please. Okay, so 4, 5, 6, maybe 7, 8. Okay, thank you. Hopefully that gives you a framing device on the importance of the panel today, which is hydrogen in the context of ESG strategies. And I'd like to welcome the panelists here. We have really senior people from industry, as well as on the technical side, the advisors. So Pramod Acharya from JSW Group, Chief Sustainability Officer, Mr. Anand from Black and Wheat. So thank you for coming in, and because you provide a lot of the technical support to a lot of the hydrogen projects. Mr. Sarkar from BPCL, thank you for being here. And Sabrish from Tubasex, also advising a lot on the hydrogen projects around the world, as well as in India. So that's the panel we have. I will just make a few opening comments on hydrogen, just to get everybody on the same page, because you've seen a lot of announcements being made. There is the National Green Hydrogen Mission that has been announced. You've probably heard of hydrogen for a while, and you're wondering, is this a technology play? Is this a policy play? Is this an investment play? What is it, right? Just by the show of hands, at least some people are aware of what this means. But I think, let's be pragmatic. We are all private sector, mostly private sector folks here. What is so difficult? Is it a technology piece? And I think this is the reason why it has taken even the government 2 years to come out with the National Green Hydrogen Mission. Because this is about a deeper transition of industrial value chains. And it touches all parts of the value chain. And that's why I think this is a very important topic when we talk about hydrogen projects in particular, not just as a policy, but also in terms of projects. And that's what I meant by the private sector perspective. If you are not planning hydrogen projects as part of your net zero plans over the next 10 to 15 years, then you'll be one of two camps. Yes, you could do the same with electrification, but you know the technical challenges with a only electrification strategy. You hit a roadblock with battery storage, with intermittency, and then even then it's not entirely a net zero pathway. So hydrogen appears like this suddenly missing piece in a jigsaw puzzle. It is not competing with electrification. It is actually complementarity. It's complementary with electrification of operations and with renewables. That is what is so interesting about hydrogen. Let me pause here. I think that it's important to move the discussion from just ESG to larger operations. And I'll ask each of the panelists to come in to give their own industry perspective and not just the company's perspective of how they are seeing hydrogen in the industrial decarbonization discussion. Prabodha, you want to start?
Thank you very much for giving the mic first. Thank you. Good afternoon. We understand we are sitting between lunch and this panel. Okay, I think hydrogen is becoming a very interesting element right now, specifically in the industrial context and in the context of net zero or reducing emissions. I think last panel also debated much on greening of industries. I don't need to talk about that. But let me focus on how important role hydrogen is going to play in a net zero strategy, specifically industrial perspective. And because you asked me to give a sectoral perspective, I come from a group that is JSW, where we are known as a steel maker. We also make cement, produce energy, and manage logistics. But I focus more on steel sector, which is in the piece of discussions with respect to decarbonizations, and always there be question asked. I think every day I get a question, are you trying to produce green steel? And more people understand the hydrogen is the key to produce green steel. So therefore, let me tell what the role of this hydrogen is going to play. Is it playing now, when, and how it is going to happen? To answer the first question, I think last panel also debated, production of hydrogen is nothing new. Even electrifying green hydrogen, what is electrolysis of water to produce hydrogen, technology is nothing new. So why we are not using? Why industry are not producing? The question is cost. It is not affordable, right? And that is the reason why we are not using. If it is affordable, everybody will use. For example, in the steel industry, in Indian steel industry, we majorly use coal, which is called made coal. That acts as a reduction agent. That means when you put coal, react with oxides of iron, it takes out the oxygen, give you iron, that you refine to make steel. So you get a problem, that is CO2. Now instead, if I put hydrogen instead of carbon, that is coke, I get water, so the problem is solved. Now, why it is not happening and when it likely could happen in decarbonizing? And is it going to play an important role in the decarbonizing? Reverse way, is it going to play an important role? Yes, it is going to play an important role. Even if you see Europe, almost 30 million ton of declaration has happened that they are going in the low carbon steel productions, and many are hydrogen, or they call hybrid or hydrogen reductions. So it's definitely going to play an important role. Is it going to be the silver bullet? No, it's not going to be the silver bullet. Possibly it will address some majority, maybe 20-30% of decarbonization can happen. Now the second question is that why it's not happening now? I told it is because of the cost. The day in Indian steel, our estimate is if it comes down to say $1.5, $1 is preferable. But looking at the investment not happen in the coal sector much, so they are expected that the coal price will also go up. So if it comes around $1.5 by 2030, Indian steel industry will start using, and so also possibly cement industry and many other industry will start using. So the cost is becoming a problem, but there are some early starter. Are we working towards it? Yes, I can give from the perspective of JSW Group. Today, if you have watched the news in GE, our CEO for JSW Energy has already declared we will be putting up a hydrogen plant. So we are evaluating that. We have a team working on it. So we are looking at from two angles. One, as a producer, because we have advantage of a group. So energy becoming the producer and steel becoming the consumer. So we are working on that. I can't guarantee when it will be feasible to use it commercially, but I think all steel sectors are looking hydrogen as one of the important lever in decarbonizing. So therefore, hydrogen is going to play an important role in decarbonizations of this so-called difficult to abate sector like steel, where it helps in reductions, cement where it will be used as a form of energy, and many other sector, and chemical, I think we have Mr. Sarkar to talk about it. Okay. But one more important thing in this topic what we have taken, it is not about only decarbonization. ESG is not only decarbonization. There are many aspects of ESG. I'm not going to define what ESG and sustainability, but let us understand it is synonym. New technology will bring in new employment opportunity. It will bring building competency in the new areas. It will help in further enhancing the energy transitions, because we are coupling hydrogen productions with the renewable energy productions. So therefore, it's a larger impact that hydrogen ecosystem is going to bring in India or everywhere when it enhancing the ESG performance of the company. So we need to look at and start building those. Besides the technology supply, the safety issues, transportation, storage, I mean, it's complete supply chain value system will be created. So we will, this sector is not only going to help in decarbonization, it's going to help in boosting your economy and employability, which is more important. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabodha. I actually feel quite privileged sitting next to the largest steel maker and one of the largest refiners. So with that, Mr. Sarkar, it almost seems like the problem of scale can be solved by people on the dais here, if they want to, right, on bringing the cost of hydrogen down. Could you share some of the plans, thought process on the refinery side?
Good afternoon to all. Oil and gas sector and fertilizers are the biggest consumer of hydrogen industrially. Today, if you take the Indian hydrogen oil and gas, it consumes around 1400 kilotons of hydrogen per annum. BPCL as a group, if you say we produce 1000 tons of hydrogen daily and consuming it. Out of that, around 400 is produced as a byproduct of certain processes, and around 600 we are making hydrogen for using in our refinery. Basically, hydrogen in oil and gas sector in refining is used for two processes. One is called hydrotreating, where you are cracking and making products, and desulfurization or hydrotreating, hydrocracking and hydrotreating. So being the largest consumers of hydrogen per se, definitely oil and gas has to contribute in decarbonization. And why we say hydrogen per se? Basically today, hydrogen is produced by steam methane reforming, where LNG or naphtha is the fuel. And if you produce 1 ton of hydrogen, you are emitting 10 tons of CO2. That is the ratio what you are doing. And that's why it's important to go for green. Now, as he was telling, why we have not gone. I'll just give you a brief perspective of how it is. Today we are talking about India should be producing 5 million metric ton of hydrogen by 2030, green hydrogen for that matter. So if you say what are the technologies available, green hydrogen means hydrogen produced by electrolysis of water or by biomass. Biomass, we are doing many things. Biomass has its own challenges, though biomass is available in abundance, but there are other processes, other things. And as already told by Mr. Prabodh Acharya, that cost is the problem. Today, if you see around Indian terms, I'll talk in rupee terms as it's told dollar terms, your hydrogen, grey hydrogen what we call, this SMR hydrogen, because hydrogen has a lot of color today, grey, blue, green, turquoise. So, n number of colors which we talk about today. So this costs around 150 to 200 rupees per kg. And green hydrogen will be around 5 times of that price today in Indian terms. So price is one. Second, I will talk about availability. For 1 ton of hydrogen, you require an electrolyzer capacity of 2.25 to 2.5 megawatts. So if you convert this somewhere, if you want to produce 5 million metric ton of hydrogen per annum, you require 34 gigawatt of electrolyzers and around 100 gigawatt of renewable power, which is first constraint. Industrially, we talk about the availability of hydrogen technology. It is available since ages. There was a flight, hydrogen flight, long time back in 1976, but which was abandoned. So hydrogen per se exists, but it is not at an industrial level, green hydrogen. It is for the experimental laboratory scale. The world capacity today of electrolyzer is 2 gigawatt. What we require for 5 million metric is 34 gigawatt. And if you talk about 100 million or 10 million, what we are talking about, where 10%, today around 100 million metric ton to 120 million metric ton of hydrogen is used worldwide, grey hydrogen more. So these are the challenges. If you are talking, are we taking a step towards this? Yes. BPCL is procuring the biggest electrolyzer today in India. IOC is trying to do it subsequently. 20 megawatt electrolyzers is being put up at our Bina refinery. The technical evaluation is completed. Price bid opening is in process. Maybe this week it will happen. And another 1.5 to 2 years, the electrolyzer will be producing hydrogen. So why only 20 megawatt? Again, the cost. The electrolyzer efficiency has to improve. The electrolyzer cost has to be improved. And finally, it is the cost of the electrolyzer, the efficiency, the reliability, which will make hydrogen or green hydrogen acceptable to the world. In addition to this, I'll put another, when we talk about this net zero and everything, and oil as gas being a major part of net zero, what are the levers we have? For green hydrogen, what do you require? If you want to use it in process, it has to be continuous. For that, you require round-the-clock power. When we talk about renewable power without storage, and what are the storage available today? Battery and pumped hydro. Battery storage is very, very expensive today. If you take one cycle also, it costs around 10 rupees per unit. And second is the pump hydro, which some of the companies in India are going, one company is going in greater scale. It costs around 2 rupees to 3 rupees per unit. But it has a long gestation period. So round the clock power has to be there, otherwise it will not be totally a green hydrogen. So it will again have some grey color to it. So that is the challenge. Availability of gigawatt range electrolyzers. 2 gigawatt is the world capacity. Europe is going. All orders are booked. And if you say the National Green Hydrogen Mission, which has come with all the support of 19,744 crore, and out of that major is for the SITE program, Strategic Investment Program. This is all being done to support. But why some empowered group of going through the mandates, why they are not? They are also aware about the constraint today. Today, even if you put up a tender to get green electrolyzers, those tenders, those availability are still limited. India, if you see subsequently, has a lot of scope. Electrolyzers, if we can develop the electrolyzer manufacturing. Today, our R&D is working with other companies. Today, we have only one Indian company who develops electrolyzers. We are working to develop, have more company to develop electrolyzer. How to upscale the technology, BPCL working with BRC, and lot of things will be done. So as we go along, if anything more will come, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarkar. You talked about some of the realities and constraints, particularly about one on the technical side, industrial process, it has to be continuous, and maybe that's the reason why some of the announcements have been about captive or in situ use, right, both in steel as well as refinery. You also talked about a constraint of variables, right, in terms of availability of electrolyzers. That's a reality, not just for us, world over. And this transition has been fast, or rather it's really picking up speed. I'm just going to bring in both Shabrish and Anand on the next part of the discussion, which is about project development and funding, because what we are seeing internationally is a slightly different approach, right? It's unfair for a single company to take all the risk and possibly that's where you will see, again, hurdles on doing multiple 20 megawatt projects. It will be unfair on BPCL or JSW to do multiple of these projects. But the reality is, if we have to hit even 20% of the national target put out, we'll have to do multiple projects. So, and this is something we are hearing from the funding agencies. We are part of the India Hydrogen Alliance, which is a cross value chain industry coalition, along with the government participants as well. There's a mismatch between what the funding agencies globally are talking about in decarbonization and the availability of bankable projects. So with that, why don't I, Shabrish, do you want to come in and talk about both the global experience and what's happening here in India?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Amrit. Good afternoon, everyone. So I think it's a pleasure sitting here and knowing a lot about hydrogen. And it's also a challenge because most of the points have already been shared by the fellow panelists. So just to bring a perspective about what we at CII are doing and what we are thinking of, as I think everyone said, hydrogen is nothing new. It has been known for ages now. And of course, the technologies that are there to produce hydrogen is where the challenge lies right now. If you see from our perspective, at CII, what we are seeing is we are seeing a host of projects that have been announced. A large number of mega scale projects also have been announced. But we also have seen hub kind of projects in terms of development of hubs. Europe is quite, I think, predominantly working on hub situation, wherein we talk about the generation, the storage, and the usage all happening within the same area. So now this tries to address a lot of challenges in terms of, let's say, the points which were mentioned earlier about storage, about transmission. So those are the aspects which I think are being looked into with this hub situation. And also the scale of the project can also be minimized, and it can be small local projects which can take care of this development. So that is one area that we are seeing globally. Not only, I mentioned about Europe, Australia also has been working a lot on that side. Apart from that, we also have seen, we are talking about green hydrogen mostly from the point of view of electrolyzer as a technology. But what we also see is that there are other technologies which also will come in. Because end of the day, hydrogen is what is important, and it coming from a clean source is important. So as Mr. Sarkar mentioned, that majority of the production that happens right now in India of hydrogen is grey hydrogen. Now there will be technology which will be evolving to convert them into blue, wherein you can have CCUS coming in to at least ensure that the need has been catered, and eventually you are having hydrogen coming in. And secondly, we at CII are also a part of one program wherein it is also funded by the European Innovation Fund, wherein we are trying to develop hydrogen using municipal waste. So this is one project that we are working with one technology partner in Spain, and the plan is to utilize the municipal waste. Right now, the plan is to have around 1,600 tons of production to be done, but this will be a pilot plant which will come up, let's say, in 2024. So the point what I'm trying to say is that it is not that A, B, or C technology will be available for production. It will be all which will coexist, end of the day, to achieve the common goal of having hydrogen coming out in the way it is required to be. So.
Thanks, Shabrish. Thanks for introducing the topic of hubs. It's good that the Green Hydrogen Mission has mentioned that. There's a discussion with the government of Kerala that IH2A is leading. But more importantly, we are having this discussion as the hubs discussion is rolling out in the US. In April is when the big hubs will be chosen, maybe 5 or 6. So this is a discussion that's happening in real time around the world. So if you're not part of the hydrogen projects in your organization, I think I would strongly recommend that you volunteer and be part of it, because you'll be creating the future over the next 15 to 20 years. Anand, do you want to come in and add to the discussion?
Yeah. Sure. Thanks, Amrish. Good afternoon, everyone. So where we come from, we generally are the enablers in the market. So particularly, we are involved in the project setup. We are involved at an early stage from the feasibility. So most of the panelists already mentioned some of the challenges that are being presently faced. As we go a little bit more deeper, we find that though there's a whole lot of literature, there's a lot of information that's already published in the public domain. But when you really try to conceptualize something, you find there are much more challenges than what we actually know about it. For one, we know that hydrogen has been in this particular sort of industry for very long. refineries are using it, fertilizers, they all been using the gray, predominantly what we call as the gray hydrogen. But the moment we talk about green, that's a bit of a mismatch which comes in. Because conventionally, you see most of these hydrogen plants are always connected with either a refinery or with a fertilizer plant, which means you produce it and you consume it as well. Now here the challenge now what we're seeing is, you're going to produce something which is different, which is a standalone, and it's going to get merged with an industry which is more from the power side. So you have an amalgamation of power along with a refinery type of application. So then in this you see that when you try to run the dynamics, there are challenges coming in. One is, do I need a battery storage because of the curtailment that's going to happen on the power side of it, the renewable side of it? Am I getting power throughout? I have high compressors, high voltage compressor that needs to be run on the ammonia side of it. And then finally what comes out most important is, once I have this green hydrogen and the green ammonia, let's say, what is that I'm going to do with it? Am I going to ship it out, or is it going to be on a wagon loading? So where exactly is the mechanism? And then we are in touch with a lot of corporates right now whom we are working with in trying to come to this particular solution. The point is, if you're planning something for an early phase, then you're looking at a small capacity. But some of the facilities like your jetties or the transportation, that has to be planned for a much larger scale. So which means, do I bring the money upfront for it and then look at it at a different date, which means my project IRR is going further negative. So what we have seen globally is, as Black & White, since we are involved right from management consultancy, we are involved into project execution and into the whole life cycle project services that are generally required by the industry. What we find is, if at all I have this particular position where I can have both of them integrated in such a way, by realizing that I'm actually putting some of the IRR in place, which is positive to the extent it can be positive. And this challenge we faced, and when we talked to a few of our industry customers, they started saying, let's go for a 300 tons per day unit, let's say typical ammonia plant. And let's have the type of electrolyzer that's required for it, be it a PEM, be it an alkaline or a solid oxidized. So, but then the question comes in, that when I run the whole dynamics and the simulation of such a unit, I find that 300 is not the right particular capacity. It can be 375, by which I'm saying that a few things can be knocked out from the capex. So this becomes more interesting, and then you run multiple cases before you finally settle down as to what is the best solution. And this we are seeing across the board. Now the national mission for hydrogen says that by 2030 you need to have all those pilot plants in place. But again, the question is, are we really running that fast? So in our own apprehension is, there is time that is going pretty quick and not much is being seen on ground the way it should be. No doubt everyone is putting a lot of money into it, there's a lot of funding going into it. But truly speaking, more activity is required, and that's why the enablers like us are also trying to push along with our own customers and clients, trying to tell them what is the best way forward. As you look at this whole thing, a typical ammonia plant, from a power side of it, when you look at it, it looks to be a very small unit. It's just that you need hydrogen, you need nitrogen, and that's ammonia. But then when you look at it from the licensing side of it, you understand there is a licensor who is going to come in. There is a front-end engineering document that needs to be produced along with it. And then comes the actual detailed design of it, which means that your whole cycle, which you're consuming, that's going to be 2 years, starts running into 3 years now. And on top of all that components that's going to come in. So this is one big challenge that we are seeing in, where people want to move fast, but then at the same time, they're not at that point where they really can move that fast because of many dynamics that is related with green hydrogen, being the cost itself, the starting barrier. But the good part of the national mission is it says that there's going to be incentives given, and those incentives are the one we think we should be looking at, and how quickly that can be rolled down is again the other point which will come in from the government side of it. So yeah, that's my take. I think there's a lot to be done, and I think we all need to work towards it.
Thanks, Anand, for the voice of pragmatism on this. It echoes what we know. A point that's missed in the National Green Hydrogen Mission is the emphasis on private sector investment. So if there is going to be more risk taken, more capital required, which is in the order of 20, 30, or 40 times more than what has been announced in the National Green Hydrogen Mission, I think we need a lot more capacity in terms of designing and understanding all of this, right? So I'm aware, I was nudged that, we need to make this session shorter. So before I sort of pose questions to the panelists, I'd like to open the floor and ask people might have questions on hydrogen for sure. Yes, there you go.
This question is for the entire panel. Hydrogen has got a lot of uses in a lot of sectors, and as Prabodha sir had said, there is certain economics for steel sector per se, $1.50 or $1, let's say. So, in your opinion, sector-wise, which has the more affinity towards accepting hydrogen? Because the way we see it, if let's say transport sector gets a break-even at, let's say, $4 or $5, then it will have more penetration in the transport sector, and the other sectors would be starving for hydrogen, because you cannot produce all the hydrogen for all the consumers right away. So this will lead to some gestation, longer gestation period for other sectors like that. So what is your opinion on this?
Who do you want to address this to? Anybody?
Thank you for that question. I possibly will not be able to tell which sector will be fast uptaker, because logic tells that those people who are already using hydrogen will be the uptaker for the green hydrogen. But I'll give two perspectives from my group perspective, and both from a production side and from a usage side. You talked about steel sector. I know you are from steel sector, and you are globally working on steel projects on hydrogen uses. See, one thing many people may not be knowing, that steel sector is already using hydrogen, and that too based on electrolysis process. Only the current electricity used is grid electricity or thermal electricity. So it will be easy to switch over. Just to give a perspective, that the steel downstream process, when you roll and finish the products, so you need a furnace where you need a reducing atmosphere where we use hydrogen. So all steel industry are using hydrogen based on electrolysis. The only thing is that source of electricity need to be changed, and it will be easy switch. And there we have found a small startup. I don't know whether anybody from Hygenco is available here. We are talking and we are finding, right now today they are able to give, supply the green hydrogen in a commercially affordable price. Then question naturally, why I am not using now? No, we will seriously considering and will be using soon. Only thing they need assured business for a longer period. So that's because I believe small steps will take us towards our aspiration of making 5 million ton by 2030. So these small steps, less risk, and industry will accept it. From a producer perspective, now if I look at where and I strongly believe that the cluster approach or hub approach, what you are telling, is which we are part of R.A.I.S.E, we are pushing it. I strongly believe that is the right approach, because you will find generators, consumers at one place, and it will be faster penetration, the cost can be minimized. And that is where, as a producer, when we are looking at individually to produce, instead of relying on the clusters, the problems comes, what are the avenues available for the products to maximize the return so that you can take care of your investments. So we are looking that as a molecule where we can create sustainable aviation fuel. Again, that comes with, if you have CO2 available, we capture them. So for steel industry, you take the CO2, take the green hydrogen, convert it to sustainable aviation fuel. So that itself is a cluster, but two industry working together. Look at green ammonia, which everybody is talking about. That can be one of the feasible options. But I am very optimistic that we should be able to meet our target, and we should be able to push the green hydrogen agenda for India quite faster.
My question is to Mr. Nair. You just said that from municipal solid waste, you are going to produce hydrogen. So I think it's from methane. Through biomethanation process, you are trying to try.
That is the technology that we're developing,
Okay.
which will of course be a green technology. That is something which we are right now working on. So it's not something which we have developed yet,
Okay.
but it's an initial stage. That's where the funding also comes in.
Yeah, actually, I want to connect the dot. Actually, under SBM, Swachh Bharat Mission Urban and Gramin, lot of projects are coming. So projects which are having 50 tons per day waste and generating 2 tons and more methane. So that's going to CBG, compressed biogas. But smaller plants which are coming in Gramin areas, 1 ton, 2 tons kind of waste they're accepting and generating hardly 20 or 30 kg of this methane. So in that case, is there any plan of aggregating the waste, aggregating the energy from various plants of smaller capacities, like 50 kg, 30 kg? Is there any possibility of cluster approach in that?
So this is something which we have not yet looked into, but of course it's a good point which I think we can definitely take back.
Because energy is there, but we are not able to aggregate it. And it is not efficiently utilized.
If I can jump in, because we are looking at this as a use case also. Waste to hydrogen is very relevant in a distributed use case, and because it is going to be distributed, the scale will be small. The problem is actually quality of feedstock. You can't use currently available municipal waste. Agri waste, yes, possible, but again, you need a short supply to be able to run those plants, right? So it is difficult to sort of connect. I believe there's a plan in the National Green Hydrogen Mission also to include biogas and waste to hydrogen. There are other questions.
Hello. Excuse me. Okay. My question is to Mr. Acharya. I think a lot has been talked on the green hydrogen. So my question is, which technology of the hydrogen production actually will lead in India? So you are working on already a technology to produce the hydrogen.
Is it honestly, I can't answer that question. I am not from a technology side. I have to refer to my hydrogen team and come back. But one thing I can tell you, what I am aware is that we are evaluating all available technologies. The question here, what we are trying to figure out from a production side to reduce the cost, which technology will consume the least amount of renewable energy or energy unit, because that's the majority of cost.
Yes.
We know traditionally it takes around 55-56 kilowatt to produce 1 kg of hydrogen in the traditional electrolyzer. But we also have found another technology, and it is from Europe. They are telling from a steam reforming they can possibly reduce this requirement to around 40, and that will be a substantial saving. Exact technology, first of all, I do not know, and I can't disclose it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Can we have more mics around, please?
Actually, Satasara has talked about regarding the hydrogen. So, what is 1 ton? It is 10 tons of CO2. So, is there any alternate tech like blue ammonia technology? Because some of the countries are already introducing.
See, blue, when you talk about blue, it is with CCUS, that is carbon capture. The carbon capture technology itself is nascent stage, means not industrially accepted. If you talk about any net zero pathways for oil and gas, CCU has to develop. Otherwise, oil and gas companies or refining will never become net zero. This green hydrogen will contribute around 15% to the net zero pathways. Renewable will contribute another 10% because of the power and purchase power. Others are what? Electrification, bioenergy, whatever you talk about. That's why biomass, when we talk about, you talk about bio-CNG, bio-CBG, then bioenergy as a fuel for all the furnaces, and then CCUS. So as CCUS develops, yes, people are looking at using blue hydrogen per se, like in our Kochi refinery.
Yes.
The hydrogen which we are generating is also generating syngas, which is used in our petrochemicals. So there we have to run the hydrogen plant at least to certain capacity, and where this CCUS will come into picture. But the cost of today's CCU is very high. Unless the carbon tax comes and government compensate, finally it is, the industry has to run, it has to be profitable at the end. And that is how it will work. So CCU is also a lot, like someone was asking which technology. Today, lot of technologies are being studied. There are ion exchange. There is something called plant photosynthesis. Reverse of that is being studied in IISc, IITs, and also by ONGC R&D. So things are being studied, which will be accepted, technologies, and how we move about will depend on cost. The cheapest technology will be the best technology.
Okay.
That is all I can say.
So just to add one point on
Yes, sir.
blue hydrogen,
Yeah.
CCS is very important. If I make correct it, U is not part of it. So carbon capture and storage. So it's not only the cost is a challenge, the technology itself is also a challenge. The permanency of the storage of carbon, it itself is questionable. So I am not very comfortable with blue hydrogen part.
No, I'll just expand it since he has told. See, carbon, what will do with the carbon? You can convert into methanol. How much methanol you required? Or how much? When he talks about storage, what are the storage? You have to pump it inside the crust of the earth or some cavern, which is again at a cost. So that's why I talk about CCUS, partly utilization and partly storage carbon.
Because some of the experiments already Acharya sir have done. We are in our earlier mining area.
Yes.
Sir has planted many bamboo plants to capture the carbon. So they are moving.
No, afforestation is slightly different. Afforestation is, yes, carbon absorption. That way mangroves, carbon absorption is 10 times that of terrestrial plant. That is another subject, so we did not go into that.
Let me, gentleman in the blue shirt, yes.
There are a couple of points. In terms of synergies, we have discussed, like one between the steel and the petrochemical industry. See, somewhere I think even in terms of the storage, we are seeing challenges out there. Same happening with the EV industry. So we have hydrogen mission. I'm sure we have EV policy as well. So somewhere in back end, do we need an integrated policy which will kind of push all these things together? Because maybe somewhere we are duplicating the cost out there, maybe in terms of other aspects. So somewhere can we also in the back end connecting all these policies which will drive actually synergies further?
So if I can take the liberty of summarizing that, can we have 5 ministries merge into one as a hydrogen ministry? I'm just, it's just a phrasing on a lighter note, but that is one way to do it. And obviously on the industry side, yes, that's what we are trying to do with the hubs. But let me just, I know we are short on time, but throw in a controversial point into the room and maybe into the discussion. There is no price on carbon today. If you factor that in, does green hydrogen suddenly start to look closer to being affordable if we are taken at par with, let's say, Europe and the developed markets? This is a question for the panelists as well as the audience.
Very interesting question. Yes, if you look at Europe carbon price touching 100 euro, so possibly things will look very lucrative for the industry if that price comes. But even if you look at the current highest price in Europe, but still green hydrogen uptake is not in the scale that would have been happened. So I think the time will prove whether, but yeah, carbon price is definitely going to be a lever to enhance the speed of green hydrogen application in industries. That I must agree. But when and how and would India have that kind of price, there are a lot of question marks, which I really have no answer right now.
No, I think Mr. Acharya has covered it. See, putting a carbon tax today, US is putting carbon tax and subsidizing the green hydrogen economy. Europe is thinking about it. Europe, Shell is taking carbon, as you tell, sequestration, putting it inside all the oil wells earlier. So they have this financial ability to do it. India is almost developing today and developing fast, wants to be a developed economy. And can we do it? There's a lot of economics involved in that. It's not as simple that somebody put tax. Can we burden all these transporters, the users of this fuel? So it may come, but definitely at a future date, some other things are also being checked.
I just also want to add one more point is adding the carbon tax also will require the technology to mature. So if we have to first have the technology to mature, then we can think of this. Because if you start putting that, the adoption can happen, but if there's no technology to adopt, what will happen? So I think it is equally important that technology also adapts, and we have technology coming in so that we can have this whole system going together.
Thank you.
All right. You want to come in, Anand?
Yeah, one last point from my side is on this particular topic. The carbon capture side of it from our industry perspective has been going on for many number of years. When we are in the LNG side of the business as well, wherein there's a whole lot of CO2 absorption that happens as part of the technology itself. It's an amine-based solution technology. And that's well versed, it is well adapted. But the issue is, what do you do with this CO2 is where the biggest challenge is coming right now. So we are already working with a few clients on it where we again are working with them and trying to use utilization of CO2. But the catch is the utilization is much lower in terms of having a nascent CO2, and the kind of products that we manufacture also is pretty small right now. But the kind of volumes that we're talking about is so huge that nobody's really come out to figure out as to what needs to be. And that's exactly what the panel also said. In a country like Norway, there's already a grid that is put up wherein this entire CO2 is being pumped back into the mine. But in India, it's difficult. It's not so simple because only one particular entity like ONGC controls most of the mines as far as the offshore wells are concerned. So trying to do something with them, trying to work it out will take its own time. Nothing much has happened on it. So that CO2 part of it is a bit of struggle in terms of the sequestering, as we all talk about. Storage is fine, and even absorption is fine. The only issue is what do you do with it? And that's where I think a whole lot of companies are still trying to work around, come out with some solution to it.
Thank you. We are at 1:45. So just quickly summarize. Hopefully, this discussion has given you a perspective of the complexity involved, technologically, financially, and even in terms of the variables at play from a supply chain perspective and the carbon tax piece, which I know we have left it open-ended as when it comes, it will be dealt with. But we are talking about hydrogen, which is really an infrastructure discussion. It's not a technology discussion. It's not a finance discussion. We're talking about redesigning our industrial value chains for net zero. And if we're talking about 20-year horizons, then we must model in carbon prices somewhere. Maybe not today, maybe in 5 years, 10 years. I'm sure the models will start to look a little different, and we'll start to find a solution. With that, I'd like to thank the panel for joining us, and thank you all the participants in the room. Hopefully this was a meaningful discussion, and if there are further questions, the panel will be around for some time, I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amrit, for that wonderful panel discussion. We'll have a group photograph.